Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today, we've got a story about what happens when someone refuses to dress down for a dirty job despite clear hints. A worker used to dealing with all kinds of job sites runs into trouble when a fancy dress consultant joins him but won't swap her heels for safety boots. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like if you enjoy the content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a juicy story. Don't you ever tell me what to wear? Some years ago, the organization I work for brought in a consultant to make us more efficient and reduce waste. She was working across a number of teams, including the team I worked for. For our team, most of our work is office-based, about 75%, but we often work in retail environments and occasionally in industrial settings. The other teams that the consultant was working alongside all seem to be totally office-based. Some of the sites we work at can be quite dirty or smelly. Butchers are among the worst. And so we always advise people what to wear, as it's easier and cheaper to clean a pair of jeans rather than a suit. I was introduced to the consultant and was told she'd be accompanying me on a job. She seemed quite pleasant and was very smartly dressed. I talked her through the booking process and explained the work we would be doing. I suggested that maybe she want to wear casual clothing rather than business attire. She got extremely angry and said, "Don't you ever tell me what to wear," and told me that it was inappropriate to tell a woman what to wear. She was unwilling to listen to my justification. A few hours later, I was pulled into a meeting with my supervisor and our manager. The consultant had made a complaint to the higher-ups in our organization. Whilst my supervisor was supportive, as he normally was, our manager didn't want to rock the boat with senior staff and so agreed to tell me my behavior was wrong. Thankfully, it was agreed that no formal action would be taken and there would be no record on my file. My manager agreed with the consultant that I shouldn't provide fashion advice and wasn't willing to listen to reason. Thankfully, it was agreed that she wouldn't come along on the job. About a month later, again, I was told that the consultant would accompany me on a job, this time to an industrial site where I would be testing a piece of equipment. The site would draw steel from large coils and turn it into bar. Whilst not the dirtiest place we go to, it's a long way from being clean. I felt this was the perfect opportunity for me. I emailed manager and asked if I could advise on appropriate clothing, and he emailed back saying that both the consultant and he had made it clear I was not to bring it up, and to do so could lead to disciplinary action. The job I would be doing normally required a second person to record results while I was doing the testing. It was agreed that consultant would be hands-on and record the results. An important point to note is that all industrial sites we visit will have a PPE requirement, with a minimum being protective footwear. Obviously, having been warned, I didn't mention this. The site was about an hour from our office, and I phoned as I was leaving to let them know we were on our way, thankfully in separate cars. They normally ask for a call so they could stop production just before we arrived to avoid downtime. As we arrived, we were met by the health and safety coordinator for the site, who did his intro. I produced my safety passport card, which showed I was competent in health and safety matters. I introduced the consultant and explained she would be assisting me whilst looking at ways my work could be delivered more efficiently. I took my overalls out of my bag and slipped them over my clothes and swapped my shoes for my steel cap boots. The H&S coordinator asked if the consultant wanted privacy to get changed, and she explained she wouldn't be. He gave me a bit of a look, knowing that she didn't have a clue what was going on. He then asked where her safety shoes were, and she explained she didn't have any. He refused to let her down onto the factory floor, and she had to spend the job in the reception. Once away from the consultant, I explained that if I had to log the results myself, it would slow the process down. He offered me one of his staff to do it. I then told him the story of what had previously happened. He thought it was hilarious what I'd done and wanted to play along. He asked for the details of the senior manager, and while I was testing the equipment, phoned to complain. He said it was unfair that he was supplying staff to assist me when he was paying for the job to be done. When I finished the job, the consultant had already left. When I got back to the office, I was pulled into a meeting with our director, my manager, and lots of other higher-ups, and was asked to explain myself. The director let me fully explain and then thought it was ridiculous that I was blamed for the first incident. I also explained that I had email confirmation that I wasn't to speak to her regarding clothing. He said he was disappointed that I hadn't at least emailed regarding the need for safety shoes or raised it with a manager as a safety concern, but he understood why I'd made a point. I was excused from the meeting, and my manager came out a short while later looking sheepish, never mentioned the topic ever again. We gave the company a discount on the work for supplying an assistant, so they were happy. My supervisor later explained that the consultant had upset a number of people, and so her contract was cut short. Honestly, any consultant who isn't even aware of basic PPE requirements can't be considered an expert. Her advice wasn't probably worth that much. Is that any indication of the level of her knowledge or ability? Good catch, OP. And our second story. How a creative homeowner turned a false deadline into a colorful victory. Not my story, but a friend's. We are both professional spray painters, me in the industrial, he in new construction. He got a HOA letter that it had been 5 years since his house had been painted. He'd closed 2 months before and was shown that the house had been painted a year before, LOL, and that the house had to be painted by a professional crew with approved colors, or if by said date, he would be fined per day past this. Now, he's a creative person who's part owner of a paintball field, so 3 days before the deadline, he's out with his crew putting up plywood all over the windows when the HOA president and 2 others on the board come driving up to demand to know what renovations he thinks he's doing, since nothing had been approved. He said, "No renovations, I'm painting the house as per your letter," which he shows them he has 3 days left before their deadline, to which he's told, "But you need to use our paint contractor and approve paint colors." He said, "Your official letter makes no reference to a certain paint contractor but a professional painter," and shows him his license. They're stymied. "But why are you boarding up the windows?" He then pulls the tarp off the stacks of 5-gallon buckets filled with paintballs, the plywood, so there are no accidentally broken windows when we paint the house with all of the approved colors on this house that was painted a year ago, just before it was put on the market. Needless to say, 10 minutes later, he was told that the ladder was sent to the wrong homeowner and his house didn't need to be painted. Last thing was, he said fine and gave them the invoice he'd prepared for materials and crew labor for the cost of his crew for the day they lost on a construction job. They, of course, said no, to which he replied, "Okay, so we'll keep on with the job." They caved real quick. It's incredible to see how they tried to strong-arm him into using their paint contractor and approved colors, only to find out they'd sent the letter to the wrong homeowner. Classic case of jumping the gun. And our next story. Crazy hag yells at me in front of my parents because she thought I was lazy at work. So for this story, we need a little backstory first. I'm from a country that has a school system nothing like America. We have different types of high schools, and I happen to be in school for tourism. In our school, we learn how to be waiters and waitresses and cooks and receptionists, etc. And after this school, we can go to college. But it's not necessary, as we already have experience. We have so-called practice. The teacher who's teaching us, for example, cooking, will send us for 15 to 30 days to a hotel or restaurant to work there and gain experience and knowledge. 15 while we're in the school and 30 on summer break. It's not easy, but it's nice. We have to buy uniforms from school for cooks and waiters and go to practice in them. Okay, now the story. I was a waitress last summer, before COVID-19, and we got our uniforms. So I went to my hometown, an hour away from a big city, to work in a restaurant. After a month, we would get paid and we could keep tips from people. So on my 2 weeks of going to work, it was fantastic, by the way. People were really nice, except 2 hags who yelled at me all the time. My mother, my father, my 2 younger sisters, my aunt and I went to drink some coffee before my work in one of the many bars that were across the parking lot. I already had my uniform on and my hair up, and I was just sitting there laughing at my sister's joke. I saw it was already 11:50, so I told my parents that I'll go to work now. It was a few minutes walk, but I always got there early to help as much as I could. They said okay, and I got up from our table and started walking. Then this random lady who I saw looking at me from a table not far just yelled at me, "Lady, excuse me." I turned around to see what was that. She just marched right up at me and looked me up and down. Me, yes? Lady, I saw you sitting down with this family over there, points to my parents, and I've been waiting forever to get my order. It's not even busy, so I was startled at first. Me. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't... Lady. Don't you dare interrupt me. It's not my fault you lazy teens don't know how to work. Now, take my order, and I want to pay right now so I can use change to pay for my parking. I looked at my family in disbelief because I was wearing a full-on uniform for restaurant, like expensive clothes, and in my part of the country, people working in bars almost always just have a black shirt with bar's name on it and jeans. Me. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I don't work here. I can't do that for you. Lady. Yes, you do. Why else would you wear a uniform? My parents looked at her and confirmed what I said. She looked at them, pissed, turning bright red. Lady. Well, at least give me some change in coins so I can pay for my parking. Sorry, what? First she yelled at me, and now she wants my money? WTF? Me. Sorry, but I don't have any, and I wouldn't give them to you anyways because I don't work here. I said that with a higher tone, and I just turned around and walked to restaurant. The look on her face when she noticed I raised my voice to her was priceless. When I left, she got back to her seat and started telling my parents how I was clearly not raised properly. Yeah, right. My aunt, who's super protective of me, told her some stuff, and my dad said she almost left crying. At least that day at work was fun, and I got some really nice tips and laughs. Why else would you wear a uniform? Because the place where I do work, which isn't here, requires them? And our last story. They tried to force me to become an HOA member. Our neighborhood has decided they want to start an HOA. I'll be upfront about the fact that I do not get along with my neighbors. The vast majority of them are people with nothing to do, and they're very nosy. As I'm sure I don't have to say, I don't want a group of nosy people in charge of when I can put my trash out and whether or not I can build a shed. Apparently everyone except me and one other house, I don't know them, in my neighborhood except me has agreed to start one, and almost all of them have signed a petition for me to join. Neither me nor my wife wants anything to do with this. I was mailed the petition last week after I'd told some neighbors that I didn't care how many people signed. I wasn't joining. Yesterday, I got a knock on my door, and it was someone I'm not super familiar with who introduced himself as president of the HOA, even though it doesn't exist yet. He explained to me that I had to join or they would be taking me to court to make me. I know it'll be used to bully me if they do. My neighbors have problems with certain things I have and do that the HOA would certainly forbid. Update, my lawyer confirmed what I had hoped. Without my voluntary agreement, the neighborhood could not legally force me into an HOA. Feeling a bit more confident, I suggested we all meet up and talk it out. At the meeting, I laid it all out. I didn't want to be a part of the HOA, but I also didn't want to be the neighborhood grump. To my surprise, the chat went pretty well. We came up with a new plan, a neighborhood association that anyone could join if they wanted with no pressure. Long story short, we ditched the whole mandatory HOA idea and went with something way more chill. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.